The cabin check was muscle memory. Natalia ran her fingertips along the overhead compartment latches, counting them like prayer beads. 12 rows. 24 bins. Every single one was secured. "Excuse me, what exactly are you doing?" The voice came from behind her, low, confident, and far too close. She turned to find Captain Bright leaning against the galley entrance, pilot's cap tilted back, uniform crisp but somehow casual on him. His dark eyes tracked her movements with the intensity of someone who missed nothing. "Pre-flight safety inspection," she said coolly, not pausing her work. "Standard protocol. In my 10 years flying this route, I've never had a hostess second-guess my crew's work." His smile was infuriating, the kind that said he'd charmed his way out of 1,000 arguments. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Trust issues." Her jaw tightened. "Captain, this is my cabin. Are you suggesting I missed something during your pre-flight?" "Listen, princess." He straightened, filling the narrow aisle between them. "Skyward International is in the big leagues. I don't know what regional carrier you flew for before, but here we trust our pilots. One word to operations and—" "Captain Bright, are we cleared?" A voice crackled over the intercom. Natalia's hand shot out, stopping him. "Negative. Bin 14C has a faulty latch mechanism. See the crack in the housing? That's a blowout risk at altitude." Their eyes locked. Thunder rumbled outside. Bright leaned in, examining the latch she'd indicated. His breath was warm against her temple. After a long moment, he straightened and pressed the intercom. "Ground crew to Gate 7. We've got a safety hold." He turned back to her, something new flickering in his expression. Not quite respect, but close. "How did you spot that?" "Because I actually looked, Captain. Not just at the sky." When maintenance cleared them 20 minutes later, Bright caught her arm as she passed the cockpit. "Good eye, Natalia." His voice had dropped that condescending edge. "Maybe this cabin isn't such safe territory after all." "Neither is your cockpit, apparently," she replied. But her pulse was racing, and from the way his gaze lingered, he knew it. "Before we get into the main story, let me know in the comment section where you are watching from. Subscribe and share because I have more interesting stories to share with you." The storm had teeth. Natalia could feel it in the way the aircraft shuddered during boarding, in the way seasoned travelers gripped their armrests before takeoff. She'd flown through worse, but never with a pilot who seemed to think weather patterns were personal suggestions. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Bright. We'll be taking a more adventurous route to London today to give this storm a wide berth. Might add 20 minutes to our flight time, but I promise the ride will be smoother than your morning coffee." Natalia's hand froze on the beverage cart. 20 minutes. He was deviating from the filed flight plan without consulting the senior cabin crew. She jabbed the intercom button. "Captain, this is Natalia. I need a word. Now." The cockpit door opened 2 minutes later. Bright emerged, all casual confidence and that insufferable half-smile. "Miss me already?" The passengers in 12A through 14F have connecting flights at Heathrow with less than 90-minute windows. Your route change puts them at risk of missing their connections. I need you to file the standard corridor. The standard corridor puts us directly through severe turbulence. He leaned against the galley counter like he owned it. "Unless you'd prefer your passengers wear their lunch instead of eat it? I'd prefer my passengers arrive on time and intact. That's what they paid for. And I'd prefer not to have 60 people vomiting simultaneously at 38,000 feet. His voice dropped lower, that maddening intensity creeping in. "Trust me, Natalia. I know what I'm doing up there." "Trust." She stepped closer, forcing him to look up at her, a small victory in her heels. "Trust is earned through procedure and protocol, Captain, not through cowboy heroics." The plane lurched. A passenger yelped. Bright's hand shot out to steady her, fingers warm through the fabric of her uniform sleeve. The touch lasted half a second too long. "Tell you what," he said, voice rough. "Give me 2 hours. If the ride isn't smooth as silk, I'll personally apologize to every single passenger and upgrade them all to business class on their next flight. My dime. And if someone misses their connection, then I'll fly them there myself." He was impossibly close now, the narrow galley shrinking around them. "But they won't, because I'm that good." The arrogance should have repelled her. Instead, Natalia found herself cataloging details she had no business noticing. The flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pulse jumped at his throat when she held his gaze. "Fine," she said, pulling back. "But if one passenger complains, you're explaining to operations why you ignored standard protocols." Deal. He turned toward the cockpit, then paused. For what it's worth. I like that you fight for them. Not enough people do. The door closed before she could respond. 2 hours later, they touched down at Heathrow 17 minutes early, smooth as a whisper. Every passenger made their connection. And when Bright emerged from the cockpit, his eyes found hers across the deplaning chaos with a look that said, I told you so. Natalia hated that her traitorous heart skipped a beat. The rain in Paris was supposed to be romantic. Instead, it was a deluge that turned Charles de Gaulle into a bottleneck of stranded crew and cancelled shuttles. Natalia stood under the terminal overhang, watching water sheet off the concrete like a waterfall, when Bright appeared beside her with 2 paper cups of coffee. Peace offering, he said, extending one. For doubting your navigational genius yesterday. She took it, suspicious. You don't seem like the apologizing type. I'm not. That's why I bought you coffee instead. His grin was unrepentant. My car's here. Need a ride? I'll wait for the crew shuttle, which was canceled 20 minutes ago. He nodded toward the curb where a sleek black sedan idled. Come on, Natalia. We're going to the same hotel. Unless you'd rather swim? She should have said no. Should have called her own car, waited in the terminal, done anything except slide into that back seat beside him. But the rain was cold and her feet ached, and something about the way he'd remembered she took her coffee black made her reckless. The car pulled into traffic. Bright stretched his long legs, somehow managing to take up more than his fair share of space. So, 10 years as a hostess. What made you want to babysit adults for a living? What made you want to play cowboy at 40,000 feet? Touché. He laughed, low and warm. My father was a pilot. Crashed on a routine flight when I was 12 because he ignored a fuel gauge warning. Wanted to prove he could make it. The confession caught her off guard. Natalia studied his profile in the flickering streetlights. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that instinct matters more than instruments sometimes. You can't fly by a manual alone. He turned to face her fully. Your turn. Why the cabin? Control, she said before she could think better of it. In the cabin, I control everything. The service, the safety, the chaos. No surprises. Sounds exhausting. Sounds professional. Sounds lonely. The car stopped at a red light. Rain drummed on the roof. Somewhere in the silence between them, something shifted. The air growing thick with proximity and Paris darkness and the memory of his hand on her arm yesterday. You think you know me, Natalia said quietly. You don't. I know you count the overhead bins during inspections. I know you adjust your scarf exactly 3 times before boarding. I know you bite your bottom lip when you're thinking. His voice had gone velvet soft. And I know you're terrified of whatever this is. There is no this. Liar. He leaned in, and she should have pulled away, should have cited company policy and professional boundaries and all the rules that had kept her safe for a decade. Instead, she met him halfway. The kiss was not gentle. It was hunger and frustration and challenge, his hand cupping her jaw while hers fisted in his jacket. He tasted like coffee and dangerous decisions. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the car had stopped in front of their hotel. That was a mistake, Natalia whispered. Probably. Bright's thumb traced her cheekbone. Want to make it again? She fled into the rain without answering. But they both knew she did. The red-eye to Dubai should have been routine. Natalia had walked this same cabin configuration 200 times, knew every quirk of the 787's layout like her own heartbeat, which was why the oxygen panel in row 23 made her pause mid-service. The indicator light was green. Everything was green. But the panel sat a quarter-inch proud of the ceiling, just enough to catch shadows wrong under the reading lights. She pressed the call button for the cockpit, ignoring the flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the equipment and everything to do with who would answer. Miss me already? Bright's voice came through warm with amusement. I need you to check the oxygen sensor readings for cabin zone 3. A pause. All systems show normal. What's wrong? Just check them. Please. 3 minutes later, he emerged from the cockpit, tablet in hand. His expression had shifted from cocky to concerned. Computer shows all green. Walk me through it. Natalia led him to row 23, hyper-aware of his presence behind her in the darkened cabin. Most passengers were asleep, cocooned in blankets and noise-canceling headphones. She pointed up. The panel's misaligned. See how it's not flush? Something pressurized it from behind. Bright studied it, then pulled a penlight from his pocket and angled it into the gap. His jaw tightened. The seal's compromised. if there was a pressure event. The oxygen masks wouldn't deploy properly in this section. 24 passengers, 6 crew jumpers. She kept her voice clinical, professional, even as her pulse hammered. And your computers missed it. He was already on his radio, calling for the first officer to verify backup systems. While he worked, Natalia fetched the emergency toolkit from the galley, anticipating his next need before he asked. When she returned, he glanced at her with something that looked like wonder. How did you spot this? The variance is maybe 3 millimeters. I notice things. She handed him a screwdriver. It's my job. Your job is serving drinks and calming nervous flyers. But there was no condescension in it now, just honest curiosity. This is systems-level observation. Where did you learn this? My brother was an aircraft mechanic before he died. I used to help him study. The words came out before she could stop them, a piece of herself she rarely shared. He said the best safety officers aren't the ones who trust the computers. They're the ones who trust their instincts. Bright's hand stilled on the panel. He looked at her properly, then really looked, like he was seeing past the uniform and the perfect posture for the first time. You could have been an engineer. I chose the cabin. Why? Because someone needs to care about the people, not just the machines. He secured the temporary seal, then radioed the cockpit to divert to the nearest maintenance facility. When he turned back to her, his eyes were soft. You saved lives tonight, Natalia. Not just service staff. Never just that. She wanted to deflect, to retreat behind professionalism. Instead, she held his gaze. Neither are you just a cowboy, Captain. His smile was small and genuine. Alex. Call me Alex. Singapore's Changi Airport had 78 gates, 14 lounges, and exactly one maintenance corridor that no one used between midnight and 2 a.m. Natalia knew because she'd counted. Because counting meant control, and control was the only thing standing between her and the absolute insanity of what she was doing. Alex was already there when she slipped through the service door, still in his captain's uniform, tie loosened. He looked up from his phone and smiled that dangerous smile that had gotten her into this mess. Thought you'd changed your mind, he said. I should have. But she was already crossing to him, already letting him pull her close in the flickering fluorescent light. His kiss tasted like the whiskey from the pilot's lounge and poor decisions. They had 3 layovers together in 2 weeks. 3 cities where they invented excuses to their crews, slipped away to forgotten spaces where the airline's cameras didn't reach. A wine bar in Amsterdam where they sat in the back corner, and he told her about learning to fly in his father's shadow. The rooftop of their Tokyo hotel at dawn, where she confessed she'd turned down 3 promotions because advancement meant management meant never flying again. You're afraid of the ground, he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as the sun rose over Mount Fuji. I'm afraid of staying still. Then don't. He kissed her temple. Fly with me. But flying together meant constant performance. On board, they were Captain Bright and Senior Hostess Petrov, professional, distant, perfectly cordial. She'd perfected the art of not looking at him during pre-flight briefings, of keeping her voice neutral when she requested cockpit access. He'd learned to address her through the first officer, maintaining the careful fiction that they were merely colleagues. The close calls made it worse. His hand lingering half a second too long when she brought him coffee. Her laugh at one of his announcements, quickly stifled when she noticed the other flight attendants watching. The day she showed up to the crew briefing wearing the scarf he'd bought her in Paris, then had to pretend it was a coincidence when he mentioned he'd seen one just like it in a shop window. Istanbul was their undoing. A mechanical delay meant a 48-hour layover instead of overnight. They lasted 6 hours before he texted her room number. She lasted another 30 minutes before she went. This is insane, she whispered against his mouth as he backed her against the hotel door. We'll get caught. We'll lose everything. I know. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Tell me to stop. She couldn't. Wouldn't. Because somewhere between emergency protocols and secret meetings, between his arrogance and her control, she'd fallen into something that felt terrifyingly like love. We have to be more careful, she said instead. Agreed. He kissed her throat. Starting tomorrow. Tomorrow came with a text from an unknown number. I know what you're doing. We need to talk. The number belonged to Marcus Reeves, her colleague. Their secret wasn't secret anymore. The decompression alarm screamed at 32,000 feet, somewhere over the Black Sea. Natalia was in the aft galley when the oxygen masks deployed, yellow cups dropping like grotesque flowers from the ceiling panels. Her training kicked in before conscious thought. Secure your own mask, assess the cabin, locate the breach. Passengers were screaming. A child was crying. And in row 18, a mask dangled uselessly, the tube severed clean at the connection point. Cabin crew report. Alex's voice came through the PA, steady as granite despite the chaos. No cowboy charm now, just command. Natalia grabbed the intercom while simultaneously guiding a hyperventilating businessman into his mask. Captain, we have a failed deployment in 18C. The connector's been cut. It's not malfunction, it's damage. A pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. Copy. Initiating emergency descent. Natalia, I need you. She moved through the cabin like water, checking masks, calming passengers, her voice projecting a confidence she'd perfected over a decade. But her mind was racing. Cut tubes didn't happen. Equipment aged, seals failed, but clean cuts meant sabotage. The plane leveled at 10,000 feet. Breathable air. The immediate crisis passed, but Natalia's hands shook as she examined the severed tube more closely. The cut was too precise, too deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Bright. We'll be making an unscheduled landing in Bucharest for a full safety inspection. Your safety is our absolute priority. His words were for the passengers, but Natalia heard the subtext meant for her. We need to talk. 2 hours later, with the plane grounded and passengers transferred to hotels, she found him in the empty cabin. He was on his knees in row 18, examining the same tube she'd been studying. This was cut before takeoff, he said without preamble. Someone accessed this cabin in Istanbul. The maintenance logs? Signed off. All green. He stood, and she saw the anger burning behind his eyes. This is the third incident in 6 weeks, Natalia. Frankfurt had a jammed cargo door. Athens had faulty landing gear sensors. And now this. You think someone's cutting costs on inspections. I think someone's cutting costs on everything. He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo of a maintenance invoice. These replacement parts? They're listed at premium prices. But look at the serial numbers. They're refurbished units being sold as new. She felt cold despite the stale cabin air. If you're right, if this goes higher than maintenance, then we're looking at corporate fraud. And people could die. His hand found hers in the empty row, fingers intertwining. I need you on this. Your eye for details, your brother's training. I can't do this alone. We could lose our jobs. Both of them. We'll lose more than jobs if we stay silent. He squeezed her hand. I'm going to the safety board. Will you back me up? Natalia thought of 24 passengers who'd trusted their oxygen masks would work. Of all the flights yet to come with compromised equipment and falsified reports. Of the man standing before her, asking her to risk everything for something bigger than both of them. Yes. Marcus Reeves cornered her in the crew lounge at Heathrow, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. Natalia had worked with him for 3 years, watched him claw his way toward chief purser with calculated charm and strategic betrayals. She'd never trusted him. Now she knew why. Natalia, we need to talk. He gestured to a corner table, away from the other crew members finishing their post-flight paperwork. Privately. She followed, keeping her expression neutral, though her pulse hammered. Marcus waited until she sat before sliding his phone across the table. The screen showed a photo, grainy, taken from a distance but unmistakable. Her and Alex on that Tokyo rooftop, his hand in her hair, her face tilted up to his. Istanbul has excellent hotel security cameras, Marcus said pleasantly. Did you know they cover the hallways? I have 4 more photos from that trip alone. Very compelling evidence. Natalia forced herself to breathe. What do you want? What I deserve. You've been approached about the chief of in-flight services position. I want you to decline it. Recommend me instead. He leaned back, utterly confident. In exchange, these photos stay private. Your secret stays secret. And if I refuse, then I take this to the board. Company policy is crystal clear. Senior crew relationships are grounds for immediate termination. Both of you. His smile widened. Though I imagine Captain Bright's family legacy could survive the scandal. Can yours? A hostess who threw away her career for a fling. The words hit like a slap, but Natalia kept her face immobile. She'd spent 10 years perfecting that mask. You'd ruin 2 careers for a promotion? I'd secure my future using available leverage. It's called ambition, Natalia. You of all people should understand. He picked up his phone, scrolling casually. I actually admire you. That oxygen sensor catch in Dubai. Brilliant. But you're wasting your talents playing hero when you could be playing smart. Smart would be not blackmailing colleagues. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer strategic negotiation. He stood, buttoning his jacket. You have 48 hours. Decline the promotion, or I send these to Director Chin. Your choice. He was halfway to the door when Natalia spoke. Marcus, how did you know about Dubai? He paused, turned back. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read, but she caught it. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Everyone knows about Dubai. You're quite the hero, remember? I never filed an official report. Neither did Captain Bright. We took it directly to the safety board. She stood slowly, pieces clicking into place. The only people who know details are safety investigators and anyone with access to maintenance logs, which includes pursers. But his voice had gone tight. 48 hours, Natalia. He left. Natalia stared at the closed door, her mind racing. Marcus knew too much. About Dubai. About their investigation. About exactly where they'd be and when. She pulled out her phone and texted Alex. We have a bigger problem. Marcus is connected to this. His response came immediately. Meet me. Now. I found something. The Burj Khalifa glittered against the midnight sky like a diamond needle, visible from every angle of their suite's wraparound balcony. Alex had insisted on meeting somewhere public enough to seem professional, but private enough to talk freely. The hotel's presidential suite, booked under his personal credit card, split the difference. Natalia found him standing at the railing, still in his uniform shirt, but with the sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere inside. The documents he'd promised to show her sat untouched on the patio table, weighted down by a bottle of scotch. Marcus is on the payroll, he said without turning. I found wire transfers from a shell company linked to Silas Chun, the CFO. 50,000 euros over 6 months. For what? For keeping tabs on crew who ask too many questions. For reporting anyone who gets too close to the maintenance discrepancies. Now he looked at her, and the defeat in his eyes made her chest ache. He's been feeding them information about our investigation. They know everything. Natalia moved beside him, close enough to feel his warmth in the desert night air. Then we go higher. Aviation regulators. The press. With what proof? Marcus will claim the photos are fabricated. Chun will bury the financial records. It'll be our word against theirs, and we'll be the disgraced crew members with an axe to grind. He laughed bitter. My father tried this. Reported safety violations at his airline. They discredited him, said his judgment was compromised by stress. 6 months later, he was dead. The confession hung between them like smoke. Natalia reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. You never told me that part. Because it's pathetic. He was right, and they destroyed him anyway. Made him look like a paranoid failure. Alex's grip tightened. I spent 20 years building a reputation clean enough to honor his memory. And now I'm about to lose it the same way he did, tilting at windmills while the system protects itself. So we stop. He turned to her sharply. What? We stop investigating. Accept the ultimatum. I decline the promotion, recommend Marcus, and we walk away. The words tasted like ash, but she forced them out. Maybe your father's mistake was fighting alone. Maybe the system's too big. You don't believe that. I believe that I can't watch you destroy yourself. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. I've lost everyone I've let myself care about, Alex. My brother, my father, every relationship I've sabotaged because I was too afraid to be vulnerable. I can't lose you too. The armor she'd worn for a decade finally cracked. Tears she never allowed herself slipped down her cheeks, and Alex caught them with his thumbs, cradling her face like something precious. Hey, look at me. His voice had gone soft. You're not losing me. Not to Chun, not to Marcus, not to fear. You don't know that. I know I love you. The words were simple, devastating. I know that whatever happens next, we face it together. No more hiding. No more secrets. She kissed him then, not with passion but with surrender, finally letting someone pass the walls she'd built. When they broke apart, the documents still sat unread on the table. But for the first time in weeks, Natalia felt something other than dread. She felt ready to fight. The flight from Dubai to London was supposed to be their last together. Natalia had drafted her resignation letter that morning, tucked it into her tablet case like a loaded gun. Better to leave on her own terms than wait for Chen's axe to fall. Alex had tried to talk her out of it, but they both knew the math. 2 careers against 300 lives on future flights with compromised equipment. It wasn't even close. She was serving business class when the explosion shattered the illusion of normalcy. The sound came from beneath the cabin floor, a metallic shriek followed by the sickening rush of escaping air. The plane lurched violently. Overhead bins burst open, raining luggage and duty-free bags. Then the oxygen masks deployed, and Natalia's world narrowed to pure survival instinct. Cabin crew, emergency positions. Alex's voice through the PA was steady despite the screaming alarms she could hear bleeding through from the cockpit. We have catastrophic hydraulic failure and rapid decompression. Natalia, I need a damage assessment now. She was already moving, mask secured, checking passengers with the methodical precision of a decade's training. But this wasn't like Bucharest. This was worse. Much worse. The pressure differential was pulling at her body, making every step an effort. In row 23, the floor panel had buckled, exposing twisted metal and sparking wires. Captain, we have structural damage aft of the wing. I can see hydraulic fluid. Her voice stayed level even as her hands shook. It's the same panel from the Dubai maintenance. A beat of silence that contained volumes. Copy. The refurbished parts. They failed. I know. His voice was different now. Not the cowboy, not the charmer, but the pilot who'd spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. Natalia, listen carefully. I'm going to bring us down fast, but I need you to keep that cabin together. Can you do that? Around her, passengers were crying, praying, hyperventilating into their masks. A woman clutched her child. A man was having a panic attack. The junior flight attendants looked to her with terrified eyes that said, "Tell us what to do." Yes. She grabbed the intercom. Cabin crew, brace positions in 90 seconds. Passengers, heads down, stay down. We're going to get through this. The descent was controlled chaos. Alex fought the crippled aircraft through each 1,000 feet, while Natalia moved through the cabin like a soldier, securing passengers, calming hysteria, physically holding down a man trying to open the emergency exit in his panic. Her junior crew followed her lead, their fear transmuted into action by her unwavering certainty. At 5,000 feet, she strapped herself into the jump seat and allowed herself one moment of honesty. If they didn't make it, at least she'd stopped hiding. At least she'd loved someone enough to risk everything. 30 seconds to impact, Alex's voice said. Brace. The landing was violence incarnate, metal screaming, the airframe shuddering, brakes howling against ruined hydraulics. But Alex held the plane straight, held it true, and when they finally skidded to a stop on the tarmac, foam trucks already racing toward them, every single person on board was alive. Natalia was first out of her seat, coordinating the emergency evacuation with mechanical efficiency. Only when the last passenger was on the ground did she allow herself to look toward the cockpit. Alex emerged, uniform soaked with sweat, and their eyes met across the empty cabin. No words, just understanding. They'd survived. Now comes the reckoning. The inquiry hearing took place in a windowless conference room that smelled of stale coffee and corporate fear. Natalia sat at the witness table with Alex beside her, their hands clasped under the table where the Aviation Safety Board investigators couldn't see. Across from them, Silas Chin looked every inch the respectable CFO. Expensive suit, practiced concern, the perfect mask of a man who'd never knowingly endangered lives. Until Alex slid the maintenance invoices across the table. These are procurement records showing refurbished parts purchased at 30% cost and billed as new equipment. Cross-referenced with the failure analysis from Flight 447, they prove systematic fraud. His voice was steady, professional, the consummate pilot giving testimony. My co-witness, senior flight attendant Natalia Petrov, can corroborate the timeline of equipment failures. Natalia walked them through it all. Dubai's oxygen sensor, Bucharest's severed tube, the catastrophic hydraulic failure that nearly killed 300 people. She produced her brother's technical notes, showed how each failure matched the signature of substandard parts. When Chen's attorney tried to discredit her expertise, she calmly recited her certifications and the 16 lives she'd saved through equipment knowledge that service staff supposedly didn't possess. Marcus Reeves, called as a witness for the defense, crumbled under questioning. The wire transfers were real. The shell company was real. By the time the investigators finished, Chun was facing criminal charges and Marcus was negotiating a plea deal. One more thing, Alex said as the hearing concluded. He pulled out his phone, displaying the photo Marcus had used for blackmail. The Tokyo rooftop, the sunset, the kiss. Senior crew relationships violate company policy. Natalia and I have been involved for 2 months. We're formally disclosing this relationship and tendering our resignations from Skyward International, effective immediately. The lead investigator, a severe woman named Torres, studied them for a long moment. You just saved this airline from criminal liability and preserved 300 lives. You're resigning. Company policy is clear, Natalia said. We violated it. Company policy, Torres replied drily, was written by the same executives you just helped indict. She closed her folder. But if you're determined to leave, I can't stop you. 3 weeks later, Natalia stood on a small airfield outside London, watching Alex perform his pre-flight check on a vintage Cessna. He'd bought it with his settlement money, Skyward's generous acknowledgement that wrongful termination lawsuits were expensive. She'd used hers to enroll in an aviation safety certification program. They'd been hired as co-directors of a boutique charter service that operated on one principle: safety first, profit second. Ready, Alex called from the cockpit. She climbed into the co-pilot's seat, not the cabin, not the galley, but beside him where she belonged. As they lifted into the golden evening sky, with no passengers to manage and no corporate masters to serve, Natalia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. Where to, Captain? She asked. He reached for her hand. Anywhere you want, as long as we fly together. Below them, London sprawled in twilight splendor. Above, nothing but clear skies and possibility. Natalia leaned back in her seat and smiled. They'd lost their jobs, their reputations, their carefully constructed professional lives. But somewhere between the emergency descents and midnight confessions, they'd found something infinitely more valuable: each other, and the courage to choose love over fear. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. Hit the subscribe button, as I will be bringing more interesting stories. Turn on your notification because you would not want to miss my story for anything.